They said humanity's army was fierce. They said no world that faced them ever truly recovered. But when the enemy came to Earth, they didn't fear the tanks or the fleets or the nukes. They feared something else. The units that disappeared without a trace. The ones who came back with eyes that didn't blink and voices that didn't shake. The ones they called the Vanishing units. The story began in silence. The Cathari Dominion had been expanding for centuries, an empire of conquest and cold precision. Worlds burned in their path. Civilizations kneeled or were erased. They believed war was a science, every variable predictable, every enemy understandable until they met humanity. It started with a transmission, unimpressive, almost primitive. A broadcast from Earth's orbital command, intercepted during the first skirmish. The words were simple, the voice unremarkable, but it echoed across every Cathari strategic network. Welcome to Sol. You shouldn't have come. The Cathari fleet commander, Lord Vathun, had laughed. Humans, to him, were another statistical anomaly, a newly industrialized species with outdated technology and primitive biology. Their defenses would crumble like the countless others he'd conquered. He was wrong. The first fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, 1,000 warships gliding through the void. They expected chaos, resistance, perhaps a few missiles from the outer colonies. Instead, they found silence, empty comms, no transmissions. Not even radar pings. They passed Neptune. Then Uranus. Then Saturn. Still nothing. Commander Shar, Vathun's second, frowned at his instruments. Their defense network should have detected us by now. They have satellites, primitive but functional. Vathun waved a claw dismissively. They are cowering. Fear makes even the brave go silent. But as they entered the orbit of Mars, they found something else. Debris, but not human. Cathari debris. Warships that had gone missing 2 cycles earlier. Their hulls were split from within, no escape pods. No distress calls. Only a single message burned into the wreckage in crude human script. We saw you first. On Earth, Colonel Dane Mercer stood in the command bunker deep beneath the Rockies. His uniform was unadorned, his expression hard. Around him, screens flickered with grainy images from reconnaissance drones scattered across the outer planets. Fleet confirmed at Mars orbit, a technician said. No communication attempts. They're sweeping the surface. Mercer leaned closer. Are the units in position? A woman beside him, Major Alara Quinn, nodded. Ghosts 1 through 6 are ready. Standing by for authorization. Mercer gave a slow nod. You have it. Quinn hesitated. Sir, once they jump, there's no way to maintain contact. He looked at her. That's the point. The ghost units were never supposed to exist. Officially, they were reconnaissance teams, small, agile, self-sufficient. Unofficially, they were something much darker, a secret born during the early wars, when Earth faced extinction from its own machines. They were trained for zero visibility, zero contact, zero fear. They vanished from sensors, from comms, from history, and now they were being sent beyond Mars, to the heart of the Cathari fleet. On board the Dominion flagship Vorkal, Vathun sat in his observation chamber, watching as his ships formed a perimeter around Mars. He admired the red planet through the viewport, so barren, so lifeless. This world will make a fine outpost, he murmured. Their species will serve well in the mines. Scans show no resistance. My lord, said Shar, but we've detected minor heat signatures on the surface. Small, scattered. Then cleanse it, Vathun said coldly. Dozens of plasma strikes erupted, lighting Mars like a second sun. The bombardment lasted 6 minutes. When it ended, Shar exhaled. Nothing could have survived that. But deep beneath the surface, in the old mining tunnels of Valles Marineris, Ghost Unit 3 waited in the dark. Their suits shimmered faintly, designed to bend light, sound, and electromagnetic fields. Not cloaks of invisibility, just perfected misdirection. To the Cathari, they were ghosts. Target confirmation complete, whispered Sergeant Holt. Fleet formation confirmed. Recording their firing sequence. Captain Ray Lynn, the unit leader, gave a nod. Her face was streaked with red dust and sweat. Transmit to home command. Channels open. Transmitting. Wait, Holt froze. Signal interference. Something's jamming. The tunnel shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. "Move!" Ray barked. "Back to the pods." They sprinted through the dark, barely ahead of the collapsing tunnels. Outside, the night sky of Mars was filled with falling fire, the Dominion's bombardment intensifying. Ray reached the escape pod, slammed the hatch, and hit launch. The small craft shot upward, cloaked by a decoy burst of static. As the pod cleared the atmosphere, she looked out at the vast black horizon and saw something impossible. A Cathari ship, massive, glistening, was drifting without power. Its lights dead, its hull scarred, no shots fired. No explosions, just dead, and on its flank, written in human script again, "We were never there." 3 days later, Vathun summoned his intelligence officers. "Explain the losses," he demanded. The lead officer shifted nervously. "3 ships failed to report after entering orbit, my lord. No wreckage located. Defection? Unlikely. Internal security verified. Their transponders ceased transmitting simultaneously." Vathun's eyes narrowed. "And the messages?" The officer hesitated, then projected holograms of the markings recovered from the derelicts. "We saw you first. We were never there. Primitive taunts?" Vathun scoffed. "Psychological warfare. Ignore them." But deep in his mind, a flicker of unease stirred. These humans were not fighting like any species he had faced before. Back on Earth, Colonel Mercer watched the feed from a secure channel. The Ghosts' transmissions were scrambled, fragmented, almost unreadable, but enough to piece together a picture. The Cathari fleet was unsettled. Their command structure was showing signs of panic. "Phase 2? asked Alara quietly. Mercer nodded. "Initiate." On the Moon Titan, the second Ghost detachment prepared for launch. Their commander, Lieutenant Kira Vance, checked her squad's stealth packs. "Our orders are clear," she said. "Get in. Plant the signal disruptors. Get out." Her second-in-command, Mason, grinned. "And if we get caught?" She looked at him steadily. "We won't." Minutes later, their ship disappeared into the void. No lights, no emissions, not even a wake. To the Cathari scanners, it was empty space, but to the humans watching from Earth, it was the beginning of something far greater: operation. Phantom Dawn had begun. The Cathari's first real taste of fear came a week later. One of their supply convoys vanished between Mars and Jupiter. 6 ships gone without a trace. No debris, no explosions, just silence. Then came the reports from their forward bases. Crews found airlocks open, command consoles fried, and eerie messages scrawled in human letters on bulkheads. Still watching, still here. By the 4th incident, Vathun could no longer ignore it. "Deploy the hounds," he ordered. The hounds were elite Cathari hunters, trained to track energy signatures and biological traces across any environment. They swept through space with precision. They found nothing. No human ships, no drones, no trace of the Ghosts. But that night, one of their hound carriers received a single transmission, a human voice whispering through the static. Too slow. Then the signal cut off. Moments later, the carrier's reactor exploded. From that day, the Cathari began to whisper among themselves. They had fought humans before. Yes, they were brutal, relentless, stubborn, but this was different. This wasn't an army. This was a haunting. A war fought by shadows. They called them the Vanishing units, the humans who disappeared before battle, struck from nowhere, and left behind only fear. When the Dominion's first fleet finally withdrew from Mars, Vathun's pride was already bleeding. He reported to the Grand Council through a holographic relay, his tone clipped. "Earth's resistance is unconventional but manageable. We will bring them to heel." The counselors, cold, towering figures of silver armor and cruel eyes, studied him in silence. "Your reports show escalating losses," said one. "Your fleets vanish. Your soldiers desert. Sabotage," Vathun insisted. "They use primitive stealth, tricks." Another counselor leaned forward. "Tricks do not destroy fleets, Lord Vathun. They destroy certainty." The words stung, but before Vathun could respond, his ship shuddered. Alarm screamed through the bridge. "What now?" he snarled. "Unknown breach," shouted Shar. "Deck 12! No life signs detected!" The lights flickered, then went dark. In the black silence that followed, the comm crackled. A voice, calm, unmistakably human, spoke. "Welcome to the dark." "Commander," and then everything went silent. The ship was found drifting near Ceres, its crew gone, systems intact, weapons unfired. No signs of battle, no signs of life, only one message playing on loop in every corridor. You were never here. From that moment, the Cathari War changed. No longer confident, no longer calculated. They began to fear the shadows between stars. And back on Earth, Colonel Mercer received a final encrypted message from the Ghosts. Phase 1 complete. "The fleet doesn't know what's real anymore." Mercer smiled faintly, a grim line forming on his lips. "Good, let's make sure they never do." Fear spreads faster than fire. In the weeks that followed the disappearance of the Cathari flagship Vorkal, Dominion intelligence networks trembled with rumors. Crews refused to patrol alone. Sensor operators reported phantom readings. Captains claimed to hear whispers through the comms, human voices that shouldn't have been there. It was the first time in recorded history that the Dominion fleet halted an invasion not because of losses, but because of doubt. And doubt, as the humans had planned, was the first victory. Colonel Dane Mercer sat in the dim glow of the command bunker beneath the Rockies. Around him, the screens pulsed with raw data, fleet positions, intercepted signals, gravitational readings. Yet it wasn't the maps that drew his attention. It was the silence. "You can hear it," he said softly. Major Alara Quinn looked up from her console. "Sir?" He gestured toward the comms array. "They're transmissions. You can hear the change in rhythm. Fewer commands, more checks. They're second-guessing themselves," Alara frowned. "So the Ghosts are working," Mercer nodded. "They're doing more than that. They're teaching the Cathari what fear feels like." He leaned forward, eyes cold and sharp. "Let's keep teaching." Above Titan, Ghost Unit 2 had become legend. Kira Vance's team had spent weeks inside the shadows of the Cathari fleet, drifting among them like invisible sharks. Their stealth tech wasn't magic. It was the culmination of centuries of human desperation. Adaptive thermal plates, quantum dampeners, neural camouflage. All experimental, all unstable. But in the right hands, they turned men and women into phantoms. Kira crouched in the belly of their ship, checking the data feeds. 3 days since Vorkal went dark," she said. "Command wants confirmation of Dominion regrouping." Her tech officer, Mason, gave a low whistle. "They're panicking, ma'am. Whole sector's gone dark. Some of their own fleets are shooting at each other." "Good," Kira murmured. "Then it's time to make them see ghosts." The Dominion's second wave arrived 2 months later, larger, angrier, desperate to reassert control. It was led by Warlord Theroon, a brutal tactician known for burning resistance worlds into silence. His message to the fleet was simple: no more shadows, no more whispers. We strike the heart. The heart, of course, was Earth. The Dominion's plan was clear: rush the inner system, overwhelm planetary defenses, crush morale before the Ghosts could act. They sent probes ahead, scanning every orbit, every signal. They found nothing. No satellites, no transmissions, not even heat signatures from the moon bases. "Where are they?" Theroon demanded. "Their planet should be lit with signals." His comm officer hesitated. "Perhaps they've gone dark," Theroon snarled. "Cowards always go dark before they burn." He didn't know that every probe he sent had already been hijacked. Every image, every feed, every piece of intelligence he thought he had, fed back to him. Doctored by human hands, Operation Mimicry had begun. On Earth, the Global Command Network, the last alliance of human nations, had merged under one name, the Aegis Command. It wasn't an army. It was a promise. No surrender, no defeat, no memory left behind. Colonel Mercer stood before the Joint Command Council, projecting the enemy's movements across a vast holographic map. "Theroon's fleet enters Saturn's orbit within 72 hours, he said. "That's where we hit them." "Direct assault?" asked one admiral. "They outnumber us 10-1, not direct," Mercer said. "We're going to make them fight shadows." He tapped a control. The hologram shimmered, showing shifting energy signatures scattered across the solar system. Ghost Units 1 through 6 will deploy counter-mimic drones at each location. The drones project false fleets complete with heat, radiation, and communications. We'll make them chase phantoms until their systems melt. The Admiral smiled grimly. And if they see through it? Mercer's eyes were hard. Then we show them what happens when humans stop hiding. The Kethari advanced. The Rune's fleet, spread across 3 divisions, swept into the inner system like a tidal wave. Their weapons cut through asteroids, moons, and debris fields with mechanical precision. But the first target they struck, a massive human carrier, wasn't real. It was a projection, a ghost fleet built from decoy drones and jamming fields. When they fired upon it, their own targeting arrays overloaded, reflecting energy spikes back into their reactors. 5 ships detonated instantly. The second division tried to recalibrate, only to be ambushed by small, nearly invisible craft darting between them, firing electromagnetic bursts that fried their sensors. Every time they turned to fire, the attackers vanished again. The Rune's fury echoed across the comm channels. They mock us with illusions! But it wasn't illusion. It was adaptation. The Vanishing units had rewritten the battlefield. Every Kethari scanner now lied. Every radar ping was suspect. Even the space between their own ships, once a void of safety, was filled with invisible enemies. And then, one by one, their ships began to disappear. Lieutenant Kira Vance's team was in the thick of it. Their small craft clung to the hull of a Kethari dreadnought like a shadow. Through her visor, she watched the alien crew moving inside, confident, unknowing. "Charge ready," Mason whispered. "We plant and move," Kira nodded. On my mark, they slid through the maintenance hatch unseen. Their suits masked heat and sound, turning them into living ghosts. As they reached the core, she set the device, an electromagnetic pulse emitter designed to mimic a reactor breach. They slipped out, silent as smoke. Minutes later, alarms screamed across the ship. The Kethari panicked, ejecting escape pods, assuming catastrophic failure. When they returned hours later, the ship was gone. No explosion. No wreckage. Just gone. The Dominion declared it an act of human sorcery. The humans called it Phase 2. On board the Kethari command ship, Tharoon's patience finally broke. He slammed his claws against the tactical console. They can't vanish forever. There must be a source. His intelligence chief hesitated. Perhaps they are not attacking us directly, my lord. Perhaps they are inside our network. Tharoon froze. He turned to the comm officer. Shut down external access. It's already static filled the air. Then, across every screen, a human face appeared. Unidentified, expressionless, eyes calm. It spoke a single sentence. You don't understand the dark until you've lived in it. Then the signal vanished. And with it, half of Tharoon's fleet. Every system went black. Engines dead. Weapons offline. In the silence that followed, the Kethari saw something outside their viewports. Hundreds of faint blue lights drifting. Among the stars, human drones. Watching. The Dominion pulled back again. Tharoon's surviving ships limped toward the asteroid belt, hoping to regroup, but found their supply lines cut. Every cargo vessel, every refueling ship, gone. When they searched, they found only fragments drifting in space. And the same words etched into their hulls. You chased ghosts, now become one. On Earth, the war room erupted in subdued applause. The Aegis Command had done the impossible. 2. Dominion invasions halted without a single planet falling, but Mercer wasn't celebrating. He looked at the map, the endless black sea of the outer system, and frowned. They'll come again, he murmured. And next time, they'll bring something worse. Ilara glanced up. Worse than this? Mercer nodded slowly. They'll stop trying to fight us, and start trying to understand us. Weeks later, deep in the uncharted Kuiper Belt, a Dominion research vessel floated silently, scanning fragments of destroyed ships. The crew was cautious, jumpy, speaking in hushed tones. One of them found a black box, human-made. Scarred but intact, bring it aboard, the captain ordered. Hours later, the technicians managed to activate it. A hologram flickered to life, grainy, unstable. A human soldier appeared, battered and breathing hard. "This is Sergeant Holt of Ghost Unit 3, the recording said. "If you're seeing this, it means you found what we wanted you to find." He leaned closer to the camera, eyes cold. "We're not invisible because of technology. We're invisible because we stopped existing on your terms. You look for heat, radiation, mass, but you never thought to look for will." The feed cut. Then every console in the ship lit up red. The crew screamed as their systems overloaded, their drives igniting. Moments later, the ship vanished in a burst of light. The Dominion scientists concluded it was sabotage. But some whispered a darker truth, that maybe the humans had learned how to make things disappear. In the months that followed, the Dominion's aggression slowed. Patrol fleets grew smaller, jump paths more cautious. They never spoke of the vanishing units again, but every commander, every soldier, every worker in the Dominion knew the name. They called them the Silent Kind, and for the first time in millennia, the Cathari Empire began to fear the night. Back on Earth, Colonel Mercer stood beneath the night sky, looking up through the reinforced glass dome. Stars glittered cold and distant. Ilara approached quietly. "The Council wants to recall the ghost units. They say the war's over." Mercer didn't turn. "Wars like this don't end. They just fade," she frowned. "And the vanishing units?" He exhaled. "They're still out there, watching." He looked toward the stars, and waiting. When the Dominion finally dared to breathe again, the humans were already among them, not as soldiers, not as fleets, but as whispers, woven through data streams, drifting in the silence between signals, living inside the very systems the Cathari trusted most. They called it the Great Lull. Entire months passed without a single human strike. The outer systems rebuilt, the fleets rearmed, and yet something felt wrong. Every system worked slower. Every code line lagged. The Dominion's war machine had begun to rot from within, quietly, invisibly. And no one could find the infection. High Warlord Tharoon sat in his grand chamber aboard the dread fortress Varnath Prime. The scars of humiliation still burned across his pride. Twice defeated, twice made to look weak before the Council. He stared at the flickering star map hovering before him. "They've gone silent," he growled. "Explain," the intelligence overseer bowed low. "Our sweeps detect no trace of human activity, my lord. Their fleet signatures have vanished entirely." "Vanished," Tharoon repeated. The word tasted of rage and fear. "That is what you said before." The overseer dared not speak. Tharoon leaned closer, his claws scraping against the metal table. "Do you understand what it means to fight an enemy that can disappear?" "It means they are not gone. It means they are waiting." He turned to his bridge commander. "Increase patrols. Double encryption. No communication leaves this sector unless it comes through my hands." "Yes, my lord." But it was already too late. The humans were listening, thousands of light years away. Inside a derelict mining station orbiting a dead star, Ghost Unit 1 watched the Dominion's every move. Their leader, Captain Jonah Reeve, stood beside a projection of Dominion fleet routes. His team was small, 8 soldiers in all, but every one of them was a weapon forged from loss. They were the first to volunteer for permanent disappearance. Officially, they no longer existed. Not even Aegis Command knew their coordinates anymore. They had crossed the edge of known space to wage a new kind of war. Reeves' voice was low. "Phase 3 begins tonight. Dominion communications net goes down in 12 systems. Mason, status? Signal seeds are in," Mason replied. "Their comm relays are transmitting our mimic code." "Good. On my mark, we send them a message." Reeve tapped a console. His gloved hand trembled slightly, not from fear but from memory. He remembered the evacuation of Europa Station. He remembered the faces of civilians left behind. And he remembered the promise he'd made when the stars went dark. "They will never see us coming again." He gave the order. In less than an hour, the Dominion's communication grid collapsed. One by one, entire sectors went dark. Merchant convoys drifted without direction. Planetary outposts found themselves isolated, unable to call for aid. Every transmission they tried to send was intercepted, rewritten or replaced entirely. At first, it was nonsense, fragmented static, looping noise. Then the messages began, soft. Human voices whispering through their systems. You are not alone out here. The stars are watching. The silence is not empty. Across the Dominion, fear turned to paranoia. Officers accused each other of sabotage. Entire fleets began to fracture, refusing to trust their own orders. The Rune responded with violence. Purge the lower decks, he commanded. Any who hesitate are spies. Billions perished under suspicion. But the ghosts kept whispering. Meanwhile, the humans watched it all unfold. Inside their hidden station, Captain Reeve and his team intercepted Dominion chatter. The Cathari were unraveling faster than expected. Reeve frowned. They're burning their own worlds now, Mason sighed. They don't know what's real anymore. That's the point, said Reeve quietly. We show them what fear does when it has no face. He looked toward the stars. But we don't let it consume us. The others nodded. They had all seen what vengeance could do. The line between justice and cruelty had thinned to dust. And yet, they couldn't stop. On Earth, Colonel Mercer received fragments of Ghost Unit transmissions. He was one of the few who still knew their mission existed. Late at night, in the empty command hall, he would listen to their encoded bursts, broken, distant, fading. Sometimes he wondered if they were still human. Ilara Quinn entered one evening holding a report. Another Dominion fleet collapsed in the outer arm, she said. Internal conflict. They've begun to fight each other. Mercer looked up. Because of the vanishing units. Yes. They're winning the war for us. He stared at the floor. Are they? Or are they becoming the thing they're fighting? Ilara hesitated. They're ghosts, sir. Ghosts don't choose sides. They just haunt. Far from both Earth and Dominion space, in a quiet nebula of swirling red gas, Ghost Unit 3 waited in the ruins of a Cathari listening post. Their commander, Lieutenant Holt, the same man who left the message months ago, watched his team monitor the Dominion fleet's encrypted signals. The data was clear. The Dominion Council was sending a secret envoy to the human border to negotiate. Unthinkable for such a proud species. But Ghost Unit 3 intercepted something more. A classified file marked Project Ecliptic. Holt read it carefully. His face hardened. They're building something. What kind of something? One of his soldiers asked. A weapon that listens, he said. They're trying to find us through thought patterns. The others froze. Even for the Dominion, this was madness. How? Another asked. Holt looked up. They're learning from us. The Dominion's desperation was turning into brilliance. Deep within the heart of their empire, scientists had begun experimenting with neural mapping, attempting to detect human presence not through technology, but through intent, through consciousness. If they succeeded, the vanishing units would lose their one advantage, invisibility. The Rune himself oversaw the project. He watched as engineers connected their minds to ancient machines, probing the silent void where human ghosts hid. Show me their patterns, he demanded. But when the machine finally responded, it displayed something unexpected, a star map. Of Earth, the Rune frowned. This is not possible. That world is dark. The scientist trembled. Then why, my lord, does it dream? The data pulsed. Waves of human thought, pain, pride, and something deeper. Hope. The Rune stepped back. Shut it down. But it was too late. The connection had already been made. Somewhere far across the void, Ghost Unit 1 received a strange signal, a pulse that didn't belong to them. Reeve's sensors flared red. We've been seen, he whispered. In the command bunker on Earth, alarms rang for the first time in months. Ilara burst into the war room. Sir! Dominion scans just swept through every known human outpost simultaneously. Mercer's blood went cold. How? They've built something new. Something that reads us. He turned toward the map. Every hidden base flickered red, then went dark. They've found the ghosts, Ilara said quietly. Mercer stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Then God help us all. Out in the nebula, Ghost Unit 1 prepared for evacuation. Their stealth systems began to fail. Power flickered. The Dominion sensor pulse had found them. Reeve looked to his crew. If they can see us, we give them something worth seeing. He keyed in a command. Charge the core. Overload it. Mason looked shocked. That'll destroy the station. Reeve nodded. And erase every trace of us. They can't learn how we vanished if there's nothing left to find. His team stood silently, each accepting what must be done. He spoke softly into the comm. To Aegis Command, tell them the ghosts kept their promise. Then he pressed the detonator. From the Dominion's perspective, a burst of light appeared where none had been before. A human station revealed, then obliterated in an instant. Tharoon watched the data feed in stunned silence. They destroyed themselves? The scientist nodded. They chose disappearance over capture. Tharoon's eyes narrowed. Then they are more dangerous than we imagined. He turned to his bridge. Prepare Ecliptic. We are going hunting. On Earth, the last transmission from Ghost Unit 1 arrived minutes later. A simple text line, they see us now. Don't stop watching them. Colonel Mercer closed his eyes. The message burned into his mind like a promise. He turned to Ilara. Get me every remaining unit still active. It's time we fight in the open. Ilara hesitated. You mean break the silence? He nodded grimly. The silence was never safety. It was a test. He straightened his uniform. The weight of humanity's ghosts heavy on his shoulders, and now it's over, far across the stars. The Cathari Dominion gathered its full strength once again, its fleets burning bright, its resolve hardened by fear, and in the quiet corners of their empire, whispers began anew. Not from humans this time, but from Cathari soldiers who'd seen too much. They whispered that the humans didn't vanish, they became the dark. It began with light. For years, the war had been fought in the dark, between ghosts and hunters in silence and whispers. But on the day the Dominion finally launched Project Ecliptic, the galaxy burned bright again. They called it the Day of Eyes. Every ship, every relay, every satellite in Dominion space turned toward Earth. The great lenses of their fleet aligned in a single moment. Their scanners no longer seeking radiation or energy, but consciousness itself. They weren't looking for ships. They were looking for minds, and they found them. For the first time in the long war, humanity's thoughts were seen. Millions of individual signals lit up across the Sol system, each human mind like a spark of defiance against the black. It was beautiful, terrifying, and unstoppable. The Dominion's sensors flooded with readings. Billions of voices, billions of dreams. Warlord Tharoon watched in awe. They burn like stars. His science officer bowed. They cannot hide now, my lord. Tharoon nodded. Then we end this. The invasion of Earth had begun again. Colonel Mercer stood in the command bunker beneath the Rockies. The lights flickered as energy surged through the defense grids. Around him, screens showed the Dominion's massive fleet assembling near Jupiter. Hundreds of ships, their weapons primed. Ilara Quinn entered, breathless. They've opened a fold corridor through Mars' orbit. We have 12 hours, Mercer stared at the map. So it comes to this, she nodded. What are your orders? He turned slowly. We fight them in the light. For the first time since the beginning of the war, the vanishing units were recalled. What was left of them? Half their number were gone. Some lost in deep space, others presumed dead, and a few who had simply faded into myth. But those who remained returned home, answering the call. Kira Vance of Ghost Unit 2 stood before Mercer, her face lined with exhaustion and quiet fury. I thought we were done hiding, she said. Mercer nodded. We were. But hiding kept us alive long enough to strike back. What's the plan, sir? He smiled faintly. The same as always. Make them doubt what they see. In orbit, the Dominion fleet began its descent. Thousands of pods launched through the atmosphere, streaking toward the continents below. Entire cities vanished under kinetic bombardment, their defenses cracking under the sheer weight of alien fire. But as the Dominion forces touched down, something strange happened. Their scanners began to lie again. Whole regions appeared empty, no heat signatures, no movement, only to erupt moments later with gunfire and explosions. Soldiers marched into ruins that weren't real, attacked phantom fortresses, and found their weapons disabled by electromagnetic bursts. It was as if the ghosts had returned, but this time, they weren't invisible. They were everywhere. From the shattered remains of Denver to the burning plains of Australia, human resistance fought with new fury. Not in formations, not in ranks, but in silence, in patience, in coordination that defied logic. Entire battalions disappeared from radar, only to strike again hundreds of miles away. Units that should have been dead were seen in two places at once. Dominion commanders screamed over their comms, demanding explanations. There are not that many of them, and they were right. There weren't. What the Ketheri didn't understand was that the vanishing units had given Earth one last gift before they fell. Echo Protocol, a distributed AI system based on human tactical memory, recorded movements, voices, commands, all replayed through combat drones and automated systems. To the Ketheri, it looked like an army that couldn't die, but to the humans fighting below, it was something deeper. It was the ghosts fighting beside them. Kira Vance led her strike team through the ruins of Chicago, guiding civilians toward the evacuation tunnels. Above, Dominion gunships scoured the city, firing blindly into smoke. 2 minutes until we're clear, Mason shouted. Kira looked up at the sky, her visor reflecting the burning clouds. They still think we're running, Mason grinned weakly. Aren't we? She shook her head. Not this time, she raised her comm. Unit 2 to command, requesting ignition. On the other end, Mercer's voice came through, calm and heavy. Are you certain, Lieutenant? Yes, sir. Godspeed. Kira looked to her team. We built the ghosts. Let's give them a show. They triggered the ignition sequence. Deep beneath the city, dormant generators hummed to life. Massive EMP fields once designed for planetary defense. The charge surged upward, turning the atmosphere itself into a shimmering curtain of interference. Every Dominion scanner blinked out. Every communication line went silent. And when the light faded, the entire human army was gone. Panic spread through the Dominion ranks. The Rune ships began firing blindly into the planet's surface, obliterating entire regions, searching for targets that no longer existed. Where are they? He demanded. Everywhere and nowhere. His aide replied, trembling. Our sensors show millions of signatures, but they keep changing. Then we burn the planet. The Rune raised his hand. Prepare orbital bombardment. But as the command echoed across the fleet, a new signal cut through the interference. A human. Voice, calm, steady, familiar. This is Colonel Mercer of Earth Defense Command. Every Ketheri bridge fell. Silent. You came looking for us in the dark. Mercer's voice said. You built machines to see us, to measure us, to understand us, he paused. But you never realized what you were seeing wasn't fear. It was resolve. The feed changed. Across every Dominion display, live visuals appeared. Humans standing in bombed-out streets, soldiers helping civilians, medics carrying the wounded. We are not the ghosts, Mercer continued. We are the light that endures after everything else fades, the Rune snarled. Cut the transmission! But his officers hesitated. For the first time, they listened. Look at us, Mercer said softly. You thought we vanished because we were weak. We vanished because we learned what you couldn't, how to fight without being seen, how to survive without hope, how to win without mercy. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes steady. You wanted to see humanity's mind. Well, here it is. And then the sky lit up. From every continent, from every shattered base, from every hidden bunker, massive energy spikes erupted at once. It wasn't a weapon. It was a signal. The same neural frequencies that Project Ecliptic had used to find them were now being reflected back, amplified 1,000-fold. The Dominion fleet, still linked to their sensor network, received the full force of it. Humanity's collective consciousness, billions of thoughts, memories, fears, and hopes crashed into their minds. For a brief, terrible moment, every Ketheri soldier felt humanity, the grief of lost children, the pain of shattered worlds, the unbreakable will to endure. The overload tore through their neural implants, shattering command systems, crippling entire ships. Tharoon screamed as the flood of emotion tore through him. "Shut it off! Shut it off!" But the damage was done. The Dominion fleet broke. Hours later, the skies above Earth cleared. The great ships drifted silently, powerless, their crews paralyzed by what they'd experienced. For the first time, they understood what they were fighting. And it wasn't just a species. It was a will made flesh. Humanity had turned their greatest weapon against them. The very system that sought to read their minds. And in doing so, they'd shown the Cathari something terrifying, what it felt like to be human. On the ground, Kira Vance emerged from the ruins. The air smelled of ash and ozone. Her visor flickered with static, the comm channels eerily silent. "Did we win?" Mason asked. She looked to the horizon where the massive Dominion ships hung dead in the sky. "No," she said quietly. "We survived." Far above, aboard the crippled Varnath Prime, Tharoon stood alone on the bridge, staring down at the blue planet below. His fleet was ruined, his empire in chaos. His mind still burned with the echo of human emotion. He fell to his knees, claws trembling. "What are they?" he whispered. No one answered. Back on Earth, Colonel Mercer sat beside the shattered command table. The bunker half collapsed around him. Ilara approached, limping but alive. "It's over," she said softly. Mercer nodded. For now, she hesitated. "Do you think they'll come again?" He stared at the darkened monitors. "Maybe, but they won't come the same way. They've seen what we are." He looked up, eyes distant. "And that changes everything." That night, as the fires of war dimmed and the stars shone once more, a single transmission left Earth, uncoded. Open, simple. To any who still listen, humanity endures. We are the light in the dark. But far beyond the reach of that message, deep within Dominion space, the remaining High Council convened in silence. They had seen what Tharoon had seen. They had felt what he felt, and none of them spoke for a long time. Finally, one of them said quietly, "They were never ghosts." Another nodded slowly. "No, they were the mirror." The war ended, but the silence that followed was heavier than before. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Cathari Dominion halted all external operations. Their fleets went dark. Their colonies stopped transmitting. Even the propaganda channels, the endless stream of conquest and pride, fell to static. It was as if an entire empire had gone mute. The reason was simple. They had looked into the human mind, and it had changed them. On Earth, the fires still burned. Cities lay in ruin. Oceans shimmered with debris. The night sky was no longer filled with stars, but with the broken skeletons of ships that had once come to conquer. Colonel Mercer stood among the ruins of the command bunker, now open to the cold air. The war room that had once buzzed with voices and screens was silent. Only the wind moved through the shattered concrete. Ilara Quinn walked beside him, bandaged and weary. "The Dominion's gone," she said softly. "No signals, no ships, nothing," Mercer nodded slowly. "They're not gone. They're listening." She frowned. "Listening to what?" He looked toward the horizon. "To us." Weeks passed. The survivors began to rebuild. Across continents, people emerged from underground shelters, blinking in the sunlight like a species seeing its world for the first time. They buried their dead not with despair, but with reverence, each name spoken aloud, each memory preserved. Humanity had endured extinction and come through it, scarred but unbroken. And then, one night, the skies above Earth shimmered again, not with invasion, but with a message. A single Dominion vessel appeared in orbit, unarmed, engines cold. Its lights pulsed in slow rhythm. 3 short flashes, 1 long, old Morse code. Parley. Inside Aegis Command's temporary headquarters, Mercer and Ilara stood before the transmission feed. The Dominion ambassador appeared as a projection, tall, insectoid, his carapace dulled with age and sorrow. His voice, once harsh and commanding, was now measured and still. "I am Envoy Catharoon," he said, "once of the fleet, now of the fallen." Mercer regarded him carefully. "You're Tharoon's kin." "I am what remains of him," the envoy replied. "He died in silence after seeing your world." "We all changed that day." Mercer crossed his arms. "You came for war. Why speak of peace now?" Catharoon lowered his gaze. "Because we finally understand what we fought." He looked up at the humans on the other side of the screen, his black eyes reflecting their faces. "For millennia, we believed strength was measured in conquest. That survival meant domination. We saw other species as tools or threats, nothing more. And then we met you." He paused, his voice trembling faintly. "You did not fight us with numbers or power. You fought us with will. You hid in the dark not because you were weak, but because you learned the dark better than we ever could." He leaned closer, his tone almost reverent. "When we looked into your minds, we saw what we feared most. Endurance. The refusal to fade. Even when broken, even when erased, you remained." Silence filled the room. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Mercer said softly, "You came to destroy us. And instead you learned from us." Catharoon nodded slowly. "Yes, and that is why we are here. To ask, not for forgiveness, but for understanding." The following months were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human engineers worked alongside Dominion scientists. Ruined ships were salvaged together, rebuilt into research stations. The two species, once mortal enemies, now studied the same thing, the mystery of what had connected them during Project Ecliptic. They called it the resonance. It was more than data. It was shared memory, the echo of every human mind that had touched every Cathari consciousness in that moment of revelation. Fragments of emotion still lingered in their systems: hope, grief, compassion. Some Cathari began dreaming for the first time. Others, confused by the new sensations, sought guidance from humans who had lost everything. It was not peace born of treaties or power. It was peace born of empathy. Kira Vance of Ghost Unit 2 survived the final battle, though half her team hadn't. She returned to what was left of the Aegis training compound, now little more than an empty field. She knelt there at dawn, the sunlight glinting off a broken piece of armor still marked with the insignia of her vanished comrades. Mason's voice echoed faintly in her earpiece. "They're saying the Dominion wants to build a memorial." "For everyone. Even us," she smiled faintly. "Ghosts don't need memorials." "Maybe not," he said softly. "But the living do." She looked up at the pale morning sky. "Then let them remember us as shadows that kept the light alive." Far away in the Dominion capital, Catharoon stood before the new council. They were no longer the iron rulers of old. Their emblems of power had been stripped away, replaced with simple robes marked by a single symbol, an open circle with a small point of light in the center, the human symbol for home. He addressed them quietly. "The humans did not defeat us. They revealed us. We were blind, and in their darkness we saw truth." One counselor shifted uneasily. "Do you truly believe we can coexist? After so much blood?" Catharoon closed his eyes. "The blood was the price of arrogance. We can no longer afford that cost." He looked out at the distant stars. "They taught us something we never had a word for before." The chamber waited. Then he spoke it, the word foreign and fragile on his tongue. "Hope." On Earth, Colonel Mercer retired quietly. No medals, no speeches. He returned to a small cabin in the mountains, far from the cities, where the air was clean and the nights still enough to hear his own thoughts. One evening, as the sun set behind the peaks, Ilara visited him. She found him on the porch, staring at the stars. "They say the Cathari are naming their new fleet after us," she said. Mercer raised an eyebrow. "After humanity?" She smiled. "No, after the vanishing units. They say it means to fight unseen but never forgotten." He chuckled softly. "That's a strange kind of respect," she nodded. "Strange, but real." They sat in silence for a while, watching the night come alive with starlight. Finally, Mercer said, "Do you think we changed them?" Ilara smiled faintly. "Maybe, or maybe we reminded them what they'd forgotten." He nodded, his eyes distant. "Maybe that's all we ever do." Somewhere beyond the Milky Way's edge, a small human vessel drifted silently among the stars. Its systems bore no markings, its signal untraceable. Inside, a single transmission looped endlessly through the black, an echo from long ago. It was the voice of Captain Jonah Reeve. "If you're hearing this," it said, "then you found what we left behind. We were never trying to vanish. We were trying to remind the galaxy that even in the dark, light remembers how to find its way home." The transmission ended, and for a moment, just before the signal faded completely, a faint human heartbeat could be heard. Years later, the galaxy told stories of the vanishing units. Some said they still existed, watching from the shadows, ensuring peace endured. Others believed they had transcended entirely, becoming something more than soldiers, more than human. But every civilization, every world that once feared Earth, now looked toward it with quiet reverence, because they knew that when all else failed, when logic, strength, and empires collapsed, it was humanity that refused to vanish, not because they were powerful, but because they were enduring. And so the galaxy learned a truth written in no ancient text, taught by no conqueror. That light is not the absence of darkness, it is what lives within it.